Welcome or welcome back to The Olive Orchard, a podcast about nothing important really. I'm just here with stories, advice, chats, and lighthearted ramblings for your background entertainment. I'm Autumn Olive, crochet fashion designer, host of this podcast, and I was raised by my grandma. Thanks for tuning into my little radio show. Hope you're doing all right. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you might notice that the angle's a bit different. That's because my tripod broke. This is the third break of a tripod that I've had in the last 2 years, and it's really frustrating because, they're not the most expensive thing, but I don't like to have to replace anything. So my phone's just propped up on a book of dirty limericks, and hopefully it won't fall, and hopefully the cats won't knock it down. It's warming up outside. It's kind of warm in my apartment. I've got a coffee that I made. It's a dirty chai with almond milk, and a bit of vanilla syrup. So I am working on crocheting a skirt. It's going to be part of my newest pattern that is going to be released in late June. It's going to be a halter top with different skirt options that can either just be attached or be detachable. So, yeah. So I'm getting a dog in a few days. So that might slow me down even more with work stuff, but I'm pretty excited. I've never owned a dog myself. I've lived in houses where we own dogs, but that was more like the parents' dogs, not really my dogs. And I've always been a cat person. I don't particularly love it when dogs put their nose on my pants or lick me, but it's something I'm gonna have to get used to. I am super excited to have a dog that I can take with me on walks and stuff. He's a really cute blue-nosed pit bull, and he's about 12 weeks old. My high school best friend is her sister has blue-nosed pit bulls, and they had puppies, and they sold all but one, and she asked me if I was interested, and I said, well, maybe, but after a while of talking about it, we're super interested. My boyfriend has been wanting a dog really bad, so, I figured this was the perfect opportunity because I have close contact with people who are familiar with this breed, and, I can ask any questions. I know the dog's family history and stuff, so it seemed like the perfect dog. And we're going to name him Moose. He's really cute, and I'm hoping that the whole introduction to the cats goes smooth and everything. So yeah, it's going to be a big change real soon. So before we get into today's discussion, I'm going to provide a few recommendations for you. So my favorite snack lately is imitation crab. If you don't know what imitation crab is, it's already cooked. You can get it in like sticks, leg style, or in just little crumbles. They put it in sushi a lot. That's where I've first tried it. It's in California roll sushi, for example. But I've just been getting the leg style sticks of crab. And it's like Alaska pollock. It's just fish mainly. It's kind of like hot dogs, but it's like seafood hot dogs. and if you want to think of it that way. So it's like, cooked and processed fish and crab is mixed into. So it's a really good snack, and I've been just eating it cut up with a bit of cucumber, and that's a super refreshing snack. Maybe sprinkle a little feta cheese on top. It reminds me of like a California roll, but without the roll and without the seaweed and some other stuff, but it's a fun snack. Okay, something to watch. So recently I kind of discovered, I always disregarded this, but recently I discovered and started to look into it. But I have a Samsung Smart TV, and it comes with channels, right? Like it would always be set to like some kind of fishing channel, and then at other times it would just be set to like Kitchen Nightmares, I think was the show with Gordon Ramsay. But there's actually a lot of channels. There's one channel that shows the series Portlandia, which is like a comedy sketch style show. I used to watch that on Netflix. And then there's also cooking channels, news channels, and then like Vivo channels with music videos, so you can like sort through different genres like 90s, rock and roll, pop, country, and then you can just like have music videos on. And I don't know about you, but I've always found it kind of fun to have cable. I grew up with cable or satellite TV, where the only way to, everything you watched was live unless you recorded it to DVR. But nowadays most of us have Netflix, Hulu, stuff like that. So then you can just choose what to watch at any given time. But sometimes it's kind of overwhelming to have all these choices, and then it's like, I don't know, spend a good 20 minutes looking through it before you decide on something. And so sometimes it's kind of just relieving in a way to can you fuck off? It's kind of a relief to let the TV choose for you in a way. Like for me recently, if I've ever gone to a hotel, it's kind of fun to just like turn it on and be like, oh, like Jeopardy's on, or Cash Cab, or South Park episode from 10 years ago. And I don't know, it's just kind of fun. Commercials are sometimes entertaining. We don't see commercials very often except for like in our social media and stuff. So I don't know, it's been fun to kind of check out the channels and see what they've got. If I'm not in the mood to sit down and choose something to watch, or if I don't have something that I'm currently watching, then I might just put on like the music video channel or something, and just hang out, clean up until I'm ready to sit down and choose something to watch. Okay, next, something to listen to. This is a musical artist. She's a singer. Her name is Lav. Specifically, the songs that I've been into lately are Sardine Song and Wavy. This time I did look her up so that I could read to you a little snippet about her, because the last couple of episodes, when I suggested an artist, I had no information about them besides one song that I liked. So this time, okay, here's what it says. Meet Lav, the sad girl music songstress, co-signed by Billie Eilish. Lav creates slow, stirring dream pop that's best described as a mix between early Billie Eilish and Audrey Hepburn's Moon River. The result is entrancing and heartbreaking all at once. So that was a pretty good description of the two songs that I suggested. But yeah, go check her out. I really like her music, and I like that style of music, dream pop. Okay, and next, something that I'm grateful for: my grandparents. This episode's dedicated to them. We all have 4 grandparents. And one of the grandparents that I list has no part in my life, but the other ones all played a big part in my life. So, and my grandma specifically, my maternal grandma, she raised me since I was, born. So, I owe a lot of my personality to her. She did a fantastic job, I think. Her life was completely chaotic, but, she still made time for me every day. Okay. Also, huge thank you for this awesome review. Vanessa left me feedback on my Mabel pullover sweater. And also shout out to 1/3 Crochet on TikTok and Instagram. They recently posted a TikTok about crochet patterns you need to get, and put mine in there. And that got me quite a few sales that day. So thank you so much. And Vanessa reviewed the pattern. She said, "I've been eyeing this pattern for a while, and I'm so glad I finally bought it. I'm new to doing designs on sweaters, and the designs are well described. I'm super excited to try making the sweaters. Gravity Falls is something I recently got into, so I'm super excited to work on the sweater while watching it. Thank you for this super cool pattern/patterns." Thank you, Vanessa. I really hope you enjoy making the sweater. I am working on making another 20 Mabel designs for a part 2 pattern for this. So that's really exciting. Hopefully I can have it done in the next couple weeks. So let's get into this topic of grandparents. So first I'll provide an overview, kind of explain some background, and then tell you how I think that being predominantly raised by an older generation kind of shaped who I am and stuff. So my mom and dad had me very young. My mom was 20, my dad was a little younger than 20. And so my grandparents grew up in the 60s, 70s, as opposed to the 40s, 50s. So, although they have a bit of old-fashioned respect that they might have learned from their parents, they also have that, rebellious flame burning. So, I've learned mannerisms, being resourceful, old-fashioned language and phrases, and wisdom. So on my dad's side, my grandma and grandpa have been separated since I was born, but they both lived in the same city where I did, and I saw them all the time. When I was much younger, I saw my grandma Rita a little bit more often, because my dad was so young. He still lived with her when I was born until I was about 3 or 4 or 5, maybe. He still lived with her. So every time I visited my dad, I saw Grandma Rita. And then my dad's dad, Brett, I saw him sometimes, but he was kind of off doing his own thing. And then on my mom's side, my grandma Ellen, she's the one who raised me. She gets full credit. And then her husband, she had been separated from for a long time. His name's Ed. And I never saw him because he lived in a different state, and he was also not nice to her when they were together. So, there was no reason for him to be part of my life. So first I'll talk about my grandma Ellen, who raised me. Imagine a small gray lady grown up on the beach in Connecticut and New Jersey as her mean adoptive mother dies young and is replaced by an even meaner stepmother. Into foster care and out again, running away to California, van life, music festivals, toxic marriages, 4 kids, and a new grandchild to raise before the youngest of her kids is even 16. Some things that will always remind me of her: flea markets, baby clothes, the smell of suntan lotion, Diet Dr. Pepper, Joni Mitchell, always busy, the beach, the pool, bad luck with cars, grown conversations with the child, too kind, baby carrots, cheese sticks, yogurts, knickknacks, odds and ends, tiny glass animals. So some of the things that I learned from her: always try to get your money back. Just last week, I went to a museum with her in Denver, and before we went, we discussed, planning, and she said the parking's usually full, so there's like a parking garage around the block. So, when I was navigating there, I went to the parking garage, and then I got there and I called her and I said, "Where are you?" And she said, "Oh, well, there was parking at the museum." So I said, "Well, is there any left?" And she said, "Yeah." So I went to the museum. I was fully intending to pay for parking at the parking garage, but when I went to the museum, I don't know, I didn't see parking meters or anything. I didn't see any signs. So for some reason, I just assumed that it was like free parking for customers. So, I parked, I went in, had my bags checked and everything. They didn't ask me if I parked there or anything. So, we went in, we were there for like a couple of hours. And then when I came back out, I had a parking ticket on my car. My cat's being really disruptive with his bell. Thank you, sir. So I came back out and there was a parking citation on my car, and I was supposed to pay $30. And she said, "I'll take care of it." And I said, "No, I'll just pay it." I didn't know, but whatever. She said, "Look, just let me try." So I'm like, okay. So I gave her the ticket. She brought it home. And then the next day she said, "The ticket's cleared. They took it off." And, I'm like, I would have never thought to do that because I really had no excuse. They did have signs at the museum. I just didn't see them. I didn't see the signs. And, I thought that I completely was in the wrong and deserved to pay the ticket. But, she disputed it and she told them what happened. I guess she just said, "Look, we didn't see the signs, and we fully intended we would have paid if we knew." And so they took away the fee, and I guess I didn't have to pay for parking, so I got free parking and no ticket after all, thanks to her, going to dispute that for me. So, next time I get a parking ticket, if I truly think that I wasn't in the wrong, then I'm going to go ahead and try to dispute it, because obviously that works. And that's not the first time she's done something like that, She has done that plenty of times. If there's some kind of extra charge, even in the same day. You know what? This is another example. We went to the cafe, and we were in a party of 4. And so we just got, I got a coffee. She got an ice cream. My mom got a drink and a soup. And then our friend got a soda and some popcorn. And it somehow came out to $40. So, the guy said, "Okay, $40.29. And so my grandma said, $40? Like, she was genuinely shocked, but she's just so sweet, and she didn't ask for a discount. She just was displaying her shock. I don't think she was even doing it on purpose. She just, grew up in a time when that was a lot of money, and she's never been rich, so that's a lot of money for her. And it is kind of, it's a museum, so you have to expect things are going to be hiked up, but for what we got, that is kind of a lot. So, all she did was say, "Wow, $40. And then the guy said, "Here, let me see if I can take some off for you." Just like that. So that's one thing that I've learned from her is to always try to get your money back. I'm trying to think of an example. I'm sure that I've successfully done this in some other instances. But I mean, anytime when I get DoorDash often, and if something comes up missing or whatever, I always like message support and say, look, this came melted or this came wrong or whatever, and they always refund you. So I mean, why not? You can't just go around taking $5 losses all the time, because then it adds up to a lot of money. Okay, another thing that I've learned from her: keep an eye out for things on the side of the road and pick them up, because I mean, you take it home, see what you can do. If you can fix it up, that's awesome. And if not, you can just put it back out on the side of the road. She's had lots of things that she picked up. When I was growing up, she kind of had her own business running. She sold baby clothes that she got secondhand from like the Salvation Army and stuff. She would get them. She would, repair the buttons and the stains and then, resell them at the flea market and stuff. That was her whole hustle. So, if she saw something on the side of the road, baby equipment or what have you, she would grab that up right away. 'Cause that's pure profit, if you take away the time that it took to repair it or whatever. But, if you've already got the supplies and stuff, that was her whole thing. So, she would be picking stuff up off the side of the road once or twice a month if she saw it. So then that takes me into the next thing that I learned from her, which is mending, reusing, and thrifting. So thrift as much as you can. Anything that needs to be mended or, bleached to take out a stain, do that. And if it's still not functional, then you can use it as a rag or cut the fabric up and use it to patch up something else. But just being resourceful in general. I have had plenty of clothes that lost a button or had a couple buttons missing. Then you can just replace it or replace the whole row of buttons. I've had to patch things up. Socks that get holes in them, I repair those. And I mean, there's an old saying, a stitch in time saves 9. And I mean, it's a little self-explanatory, but so, if you notice a small hole in your clothes, it starts out small usually, so you can fix it with one stitch, a couple stitches. But if you just let it sit there, then, it'll run larger and then it'll take 9 stitches to fix it. So, a stitch in time saves 9. And that couldn't be more true. And, a repair over one stitch is much less noticeable than 1 over 9 stitches, So I always try to repair my clothes right away. And if it can't be repaired, then it becomes scrap fabric. Or, if it's just not up to my liking, but it's still usable, you can always donate it to a thrift store. If it's going to be worn. If it's not going to be worn, they're just going to put it in a landfill. So if it's not good enough to be worn, you should just keep it for rags and fabric. Or if you some things you can do with that: rags to wash your car, wash your floor, things like that. Or you can cut the fabric up and use it as like bedding or stuffing. So like if you create stuffed animals or something like that, you can use cut up fabric as stuffing as opposed to polyfill, or in addition to polyfill. Okay, the next thing that I learned from her is staying busy and stay making money. So she has always had this clothing business going on. When it started, she had there was this building that we lived in. It was like 3 shops on the bottom. In the center was the landlady's office. In the shop to the left, it was a barber shop. And in the shop to the right, it was my grandma's consignment shop with baby and children's clothes. And then upstairs, there was 2 apartments. And so we lived in one of those apartments. And, you know, she's always making money. Even now, she's moved. She doesn't own a shop, but she does these sales. You know, she volunteers at this thrift store and, you know, takes home stuff that's in good condition, fixes it up, makes, you know, pairs it together to make outfits. And then she takes it to these little, like, sales where she can just set it up and leave it there for the weekend and people come shop, and then she gets, you know, 70% of it or whatever. You know, so the fact that she's just always been hardworking and, you know, kind of doing multiple things to make money, you know, that definitely inspired me to stay busy, you know, because she would rarely sit down and watch something, you know, even if she wasn't working, she was just doing something else, you know, mending clothes or sorting buttons or whatever she needed to do. She would just, you know, she couldn't sit still. And I really inherited that. You know, sometimes I can just sit still and relax, but a lot of the times I'm like itching to get something done, you know, to like have that feeling of success for every little thing. And, you know, if I can make money from that, that's even better. You know, I'm not obsessed with money, but, you know, growing up, we didn't have a ton of money. So it's kind of always in the back of my head, this, you know, survival instinct to, you know, make sure that I have enough money to keep me afloat and stuff. And another thing that I learned from her is like old-fashioned vocabulary. Sometimes I speak in more modern dialect, but there's plenty of words. I can't even think of any examples, but, you know, words that I picked up from her. She had studied English a lot, and she was an English teacher for some time. So, you know, our language changes over time. So whatever words were popular 50, 60 years ago, you know, are still with her. And so they have in turn passed down to me. You know, like I said, I can't think of any examples, but I'm sure I've used some old-fashioned words here and there, every now and again. And so there was at one point where I was taken out of public school, and she homeschooled me for a year or so. And she, you know, of course we got the textbooks from the thrift store. So it was like all mixed from different decades and different grade levels. So I was in like 5th grade, and then she had this 8th grade math book and college level English vocabulary words. And, you know, I mean, that was only 1 year of study, but it was definitely interesting. You know, I definitely wasn't learning the same thing as the people in public school at the time. And she also would ask me math facts in the car. You know, every time we got in the car, it would be, okay, what's 9 times 5? What's 8 times 7? And it was so annoying at the time, but I still remember so many math facts from that. And, you know, I'm glad that she did that for me. Now the cat's in the shot. Oh, how I wish this tripod didn't break. I really did not want to buy a whole new tripod. Okay, next. So this is something that I learned something that I learned not to do from her. So she would be so upset if I called her a hoarder. She's not a hoarder, but every little thing, like, okay, for example, this tripod that just broke, she would probably hang on to it. She would probably think, we can probably use these parts for something else. Or, any little thing, like old children's toys that had the little batteries, like the little back plate that comes off that covers the batteries. She had a lot of those saved, I remember specifically. And it was for like toys that were long gone, and she would still have the little back plates. And she was like, well, this might come in handy. But really, the chances of it coming in handy are kind of slim, because most toys have a custom fit back plate, battery plate, or whatever. So like the chances that you're going to have another toy that would fit the exact same dimensions of that one, unless it's the same toy. But like I'm saying, it's like 1% chance that it's going to come in handy later on. So things like that, and other little, like, certain things like that. Like some things I still hang on to, like when you buy something that you have to assemble yourself, it comes with extra hardware, like a couple extra nuts and bolts and screws and stuff. And I hang on to those, even though it's a little bit less likely that they'll come in handy. I have had them come in handy a couple times. So that's something that's more like a 50% chance that it's going to come in handy. So that's something that I think it's okay to save. But when it comes down to like, are you really going to find this to be useful in the future? And a lot of things that she saved didn't fit that criteria in my opinion. I mean, not to say that they never came in handy, but it was just a lot of stuff, I mean, we still had room to walk, we still had counter space and whatever, but like the junk drawer was packed, and there was plenty of bags and bins of things like that just would have been okay in the trash. So, I try hard these days to make sure that I am not hanging on to stuff like that. It's a risk that I'm willing to take, okay? I've had a couple instances where I'm like, oh, what would have been perfect for this? That thing that I threw away. But it's really not worth hanging on to everything just in case, So I've watched some like minimalism videos on YouTube some years ago, and I'm like, this is the thing, because I moved around a lot after I left her house. I moved a few more times, so I already didn't have a lot of stuff accumulated like that, and so, it wasn't like I had to get rid of a lot of stuff. But now that I live with my boyfriend, we live alone, we don't hang on to anything like that. If clothes are messed up, we either repair them or donate them. If something breaks, I might take off a couple pieces of this tripod that aren't broken and then see if I can find the same brand of tripod, because then I'll have some spare pieces. But what broke was like the center, just the heart of it, like there's no fixing this. I can try to put electrical tape around it, but it's really not going to work, because it's like the head broke off the neck right at the connection point. So it's not like I can put tape around the pole, because it's just done for, unfortunately. So yeah, so that's what I learned from her, not to collect and hoard things and hang on to things that are nearly useless. Some people love to get rid of stuff. Some people love to hang on to it just in case, but it's a balance. Okay, so another thing that I learned not to do is not to let people walk all over you. Like I mentioned before, one of the phrases I used to describe her was too kind. And what I mean by that is she would attract the wrong kind of friends. Friends who, would chat you up and stuff and then ask for a favor. And then when you need a favor, they're unreachable. And people, she's always made it a mission to fix people. And that's an amazing and beautiful thing, but it's just heartbreaking to see when, the friend might not be appreciative of it or, not be there to return the favor. It's just a matter of being there for somebody. And she had a real hard time saying no and setting boundaries. And, she didn't want people to dislike her. But I said from a young age, I thought, I'm not going to let this be me. I'm going to set my boundaries and I'm going to do so in her honor. I mean, she's still alive, but you know what I mean? I'm not going to carry this on. I'm going to set boundaries and I'm going to, help her. And I think that I have, I've really been supportive of her since she moved out of that town. She's been in a town that has a little bit more respectful people. And, I've helped her say, look, because we talk on the phone all the time and she tells me oh, I met this person and, they're asking a lot of me. And I tell her, look, just say no. You're not being mean. You're not being a bitch. You are standing up for yourself. We all have the same 24 hours in a day, you don't have excess money to just hand out to people. You don't have excess strength and excess time. If they're not willing to return a favor, then they should be asking somebody else. And I would like to think that I have helped her in growing stronger and growing the ability to set boundaries. And she's been doing so much better with that. And I'm really proud of her because she's getting old and she has, I've never seen her take a break. I've never seen her take much of anything for herself. And, she really deserves to. So I'm happy to see her, living her best life in a nice apartment that she has set up in her own way. No kids to come mess up her little knickknacks and glass animals and stuff. She is completely at peace. She's still out working on these baby clothes and this baby business, but I mean, that's truly what she wants to do. She doesn't need to be doing that anymore, but she's just doing it for fun and to keep busy and to keep it keeps her physically active too. So I mean, that's all good. She's really great. Despite her chaotic past and abusive husbands, she's doing all right. There's a story. I was trying to think of a good story to tell here. A funny one, maybe. Her and I, we've been best friends, since I could talk. She was talking to me maybe a little bit too much for a kid, but I think that I don't think that hurt me. I think it just made me more mature. And like I said, now I have the, insight to know that she was getting taken advantage of by friends, and that now I know how to avoid that happening to me. I don't think there was anything wrong with the fact that she, would just, spill everything to me when I was really young. So anyway, I was trying to think of a funny story, but then I realized that our life, not because of her, just everything, like growing up, things were pretty chaotic. None of her fault, but just like there was one time we were trying to travel to Colorado from Virginia to visit my uncle, and it was snowing really hard, and so we ended up stranded in Chicago. My uncle, called us a cab and got us a hotel in Chicago, but for some reason we had to go to like the Salvation Army. Maybe we lost our bags or something. It's kind of hard to remember, but I mean, it was an experience. It wasn't fun. It wasn't a funny story, but we had fun. There was this advertisement on the TV, the hotel TV, and it just had this woman who had like, frizzy hair, and she looked kind of stressed, and it said, stay with us and take a break or whatever. And my grandma was like, that frazzled lady, that's me. And that was kind of like an inside joke for a while, like the frazzled lady. So we had all kinds of like funny jokes with each other and stuff, and we had a lot of fun. We were best friends. But thinking back now, I'm like, these stories aren't very funny, like it was funny to us. It's kind of more inside jokes. So I'm trying to think of like a funny story. I'm going to tell you one later from my grandpa, but yeah, so I guess the closest thing I have to funny here is that when I was 10, we went to this petting zoo farm kind of thing, and at the end of the tour, we saw llamas, we saw potbelly pigs, we saw cows, but at the end of the tour, we went into this little shed, and the tour guide, she took out this pouch that she had around her neck, and she pulled out a sugar glider. And if you've never seen sugar gliders, they kind of look like really small squirrels. They're not squirrels, they're marsupials. So they carry their baby in the pouch, and they're from Australia, I believe. But they look like a little gray squirrel with a black stripe down the nose and the back. And they have like this long tail, and they have little membranes between their legs to help them glide. So the lady showed us this sugar glider, and I thought it was the cutest thing in the world. And so I said, oh my gosh, I want one of these for my birthday. But turns out they were, I forget if it was 100 or 200, but they were expensive for a little pet like that. But, my grandma and my mom went in together and got me one. And so, I had it in a cage and stuff in my room. But these things bark at night, like they yip, like, I'm not going to try to do an impression here, but you could look it up if you want. It's like this little barking sound. And sometimes they do this sound, it's called crabbing. It's like, rah, 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 but it's loud. So there's like yipping and crabbing, and, they kind of smell like a hamster or anything else in a cage. And it was right by my bed. So it was like, I kind of got tired of it after a while. I was only 10. I didn't really know how to take care of a pet properly, but anyway, so she was like, okay, I'll put it in my room. So she put it in her room, and then she was like, well, I want to let it fly and glide. So she had her door closed, and, she just started to let it run loose. Like, she would let it go up, jump up from her bed onto the computer table, and then climb up her tapestry, and then it would launch down and glide across the room. And she loved it. Like, she would just let it do that. They're nocturnal, so it was flying all night, and she loved it. And then so she got it a mate, and then they had babies, and they just nested inside of her dresser and stuff. And so she was kind of like a crazy sugar glider lady for a while. like a crazy cat lady, but with sugar gliders. And unfortunately, like, they always ended up dying somehow tragically. Like, this is what I mean. I was trying to come up with a funny story, but these stories are not funny. This was the best that I could do. But it was kind of sad because the sugar gliders, you know, like one time mom was pregnant with twins, and then the babies fell out of the pouch and then were found under the bed. And then another time, like, the cat got one of them, and another time somebody left the window cracked and my grandma didn't know, and so then one of them went out the window. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I calculated it one time, and I think she had, like, between the parents and the babies, I think she went through like 15 sugar gliders. And then she moved into this apartment where pets weren't allowed, but she still did. She smuggled them in. She kept them in her closet. She kept them, yeah, so like she just let them run free in the closet like she did in her bedroom at the first place. But she just let them live in the closet. And, you know, like I said, they get pretty loud at night with the barking and the yapping and stuff. And so, you know, after a couple weeks in this new apartment, her neighbor comes knocking on her door. And she was really nervous. She thought the neighbor was going to have some kind of noise complaints, like, oh my gosh, are you keeping a dog in here? Like, but no, the neighbor said, I just want to thank you for being such a nice and quiet neighbor. And so, of course, my grandma was relieved, and I thought that was kind of funny because, you know, I mean, she's smuggling exotic animals into her little old folks apartment. But yeah, that's a basic overview of her. You know, legend has it, a family legend that is, you know, my mom, she was interested in having a kid, but she says the main reason that she had a kid was, you know, because my grandma at the time, all of her kids were growing up and moving out, and that was causing her quite a bit of depression. So my mom thought that it would be good to have a baby that would give my grandma a little bit more hope in life, something to live for. And I'd like to think that's true, that I was a little angel baby, because apparently something worked, and maybe it was me. So, yeah, and I mentioned before that her husband, they had been separated for a long time, and he was abusive towards her, and he lived in another state. So that would be my maternal granddad, and I knew nothing much about him. He grew rubies in his house, lab grown rubies, which seems kind of weird, but I mean, he wasn't rich or anything from it, so I don't know, maybe it was just a hobby, maybe they weren't good enough to sell. That's about all I know about him, but he was never worth, I met him one time, and, you know, of course he didn't seem abusive when I met him, but I didn't really want anything to do with him based on the stories I heard. I'm switching out my crochet project here because I ran out of navy blue yarn, and I'm just not sure what I'm going to do next with that skirt. So now I'm making a cotton diamond top. So just hang on a second, and then I'll be back to the story. So now let's talk about my dad's side. So like I said, my dad was really young when I was born. Like, I think he was 18. So, you know, he still lived with his mom. And his mom, of course, was not too happy to hear about this. You know, my dad was kind of the rebellious guy at school, kind of getting into a lot of trouble. He was the artsy type, a little bit gothic maybe, but, he was happy as can be. So, even though my grandma Rita had her doubts at first, she was okay. She was a high school English teacher, and I think that she didn't like kids too much. So, of course, everybody likes babies. Most people like babies. And so she would visit me a little bit when I was a baby, but, she didn't play a huge part in my life. I would stay with her sometimes for like babysitting purposes. And I have some fun memories with her. I remember getting her car with her. It was a Volkswagen, and I remember sometimes she would pick me up from daycare, and I would tell her stories. I guess I was telling her stories about like the daycare workers or maybe my friends at daycare, but I guess I didn't say who. So I would say like, oh, they gave us juice today. And she'd be like, who is they? And as a kid, I always thought I just didn't really understand the question, which is silly. But, I don't know. She's nice. I think she really got, interested in me as I was getting older, because I think just little kids weren't really her cup of tea. Like I said, she was a high school teacher, so by the time I got to middle school and high school, she seemed to be more interested in getting to know me. And she always loves to post pictures of me on her Facebook, and she's got a ton of friends just from around town and stuff. It was a small town where I grew up, in Virginia, and so, for people who never left the area, like her and my dad, they have, just a ton of friends down the line, from friends and friends of friends and family friends that, also never left and whatever. So on Facebook, she has a ton of friends, and she likes to share photos of me, and then there's always comments about how I look just like her and stuff, which I do think that I got quite a lot of looks from that side of my family. So yeah, and she had separated from my granddad, Brett, before I can remember. I assume it was before I was born, but could have been when I was really young, but it seemed like they were never really together when I gained consciousness. So, that's all I really have to say about her. But my dad's dad, Brett, played more of a role. I didn't see much of him when I was younger, but there was a time when, after my grandma homeschooled me, I wanted to live with my dad. So I lived with him for about 3 years, from basically during all of middle school. So between the time when I was like 11, 12, and 13. So it was at first just me and my dad's girlfriend and her daughter. So, we considered ourselves stepsisters. And so here is my introduction of my grandpa, Brett. And also, side note, I called my grandparents by their first name. A lot of people find that rude, and they even would have found it rude. Growing up, they would have never been able to call their parents or grandparents by their first name. But it was kind of just like a funny thing. Like when I was younger, like a little kid, like I just called people by their names. I didn't call my mom and dad. I called them mommy and daddy. But, my grandma Ellen, I just called her Ellen. And like Rita, I called her Rita. Brett, I called him Brett. And that was just the thing. I think everybody just thought it was funny and cute, and it was no kind of disrespect at all. So, you know, it is what it is. So here's my introduction for Brett. Imagine a wise but spacey old dad with ass-length silver hair drives a yellow Volvo, street-performing sax player, and just one day his Volvo ran out of gas when he was at my dad's house. And so naturally, he just never left. He never left to get gas. So he just started living in the living room. Like, he just would hang out on the couch all day. He did some yard work and stuff and, you know, cooking sometimes, food prep. But he basically just stayed there. And, you know, then he got a girlfriend, and then they lived there together too. And so they just kind of coexisted with us. And it was all for the better, I think. You know, he had a bit of like a outdated sense of humor. Sometimes he would say things that kind of hurt my feelings, but I don't think it was that intentional. I think it was more just a, you know, for whatever reason, he just had like impulsive to speak before thinking kind of thing. So, you know, I don't hold any kind of resentment about that. But here are some things that remind me of him. Smooth jazz, gardening, bird watching, plant identification books, water out of a 2-liter Coke bottle, Jeopardy, Wheel of Fortune, all day on the couch, rolled cigarettes, and old bikes. He collected old bikes and just kept them in the shed. You know, at this property where we lived, this was actually like my great-grandparents' property, which I never knew them, but, you know, it got passed down to my dad. So, like, there was a lot of fruit trees on the property. There were some old sheds, like there was like a horse stable and a chicken coop and like a wood shed and a smokehouse, like for smoking meat, like to hang up meat and smoke it. And then like a wood shop. So there was a lot of like old buildings on the property and stuff. And he had a bunch of old bikes in one of them. I don't know if he planned to fix them up and resell them or something, but I just remember there was like a ton of old bikes there. So, you know, I never was in need of a bike because he can just get me one, and, you know, he biked a lot, biked on trails and stuff, and so, you know, that was kind of his thing. He was just like an outdoorsy kind of guy. But yeah, here's some of the things that I learned from him. Life is slow. Go outside and look at plants and animals. You know, he, unlike my grandma Ellen, he did not spend all day working. He relaxed plenty of the day. You know, he went outside for a couple of hours and did some gardening or whatever. And then he would come in and he would just relax, you know, roll up a cigarette and chill out and just talk to his girlfriend, talk to me, and, you know, tell stories and stuff, play the saxophone. You know, he really indulged on his hobbies. And I think that's a great thing to learn. You know, of course, I take after my grandma a little bit more, and I kind of just feel guilty if I'm not staying busy. But, you know, I always think about him, and I'm thinking, you know, he really savored life and enjoyed it. So, you know, and to go outside on a walk and not only enjoy the fresh air, but to stop and look at the animals and, you know, sit and watch a squirrel, sit and watch, you know, flowers float down from the trees, and, you know, identify different plants and stuff. And, you know, it's a really interesting skill, and it is something that I want to get into, you know, foraging and stuff like that. You know, he taught me what flowers are edible and stuff, and, you know, that's a really good skill and could come in handy. But I mean, I don't think I'm going to get stranded out in the wilderness anytime soon, but, you know, it's fun to know what Mother Earth has to offer. And even though he wasn't busy 24/7 like my grandma Ellen was, he also had the same entrepreneurial spirit. He played his saxophone on the streets of Roanoke, which is like kind of like Portland, Oregon, or Boulder, Colorado, or something, where you have, people on the street performing and stuff. So, he made some money that way, and whatever, he would go fix up the bikes and stuff. And so he had that entrepreneurial spirit. And he was always supportive of me, ever since I was a kid. My dad had a lot of friends come by and stuff. And so I would always try to like sell them drawings or, make something out of popsicle sticks and sell it, or, come up with these grand business ideas. And so he was always supportive of that. And, him and my dad never had like major corporate jobs. They always just kind of made money their own way. My dad makes hot sauce, and he made wine at one point, and a few other things just to make money in different ways without relying on like a office and a boss kind of system. Another thing that I learned from him is that pharmaceutical companies and medication companies, when they're encouraging unnecessary use, is really toxic, So like holistic remedies, natural remedies always should be tried first. Okay, I'm not a medical professional. This should not be, taken lightly. But for, him and my family, we didn't have any kind of physical aversion to trying out holistic remedies. So that was always the go-to first, is to always, if you have a headache, try laying down for bed, drinking some water, covering your eyes, putting a cold cloth on your head. These kinds of things, maybe try some herbal tea. And so to this day, I don't have chronic headaches. Some people have chronic headaches. Some people have migraines. Some people need medication for things like that. But for me, when I get a headache, I know that it's just my body trying to tell me something. My body's trying to tell me, drink some water, take a break. So I try all those things first. And because of that, I end up taking ibuprofen once a month, maybe once every other month. I can usually get rid of a headache in a few hours if I try, without taking medication. And that works really well for me, and saves money too, because pharmaceutical companies, medication is a miracle for some people, but after all, it is a business, and they do try to market it to you, even if you don't need it, like over-the-counter stuff, aspirin, things like that. They're non-addictive sometimes, but some of this stuff is not meant to be taken every day for some people. And so I am kind of grateful to at least have opened my eyes to that, like take it with a grain of salt or whatever, but just to have something to think about, like there are options to try, for me to try something before taking an ibuprofen. And if it doesn't work, of course I'll take an ibuprofen. Like if it's a headache that's lasting longer than a few hours, or, if after a day I still feel it there, then I'll take an ibuprofen. But, who's to say he was even right, but just, that's something that I learned from him, and something that I have taken into account and put into action. And so, I don't know, that's just, I'm just listing things here that I've learned from him. I have no proof that it's true or anything like that. So yeah, he was a pretty cool guy. I have a funny story about him. So I mean, he was just hanging out at home all day, and we had a really small kitchen, like super small, probably the kitchen was like, I don't know, 4 feet by 3 feet. The floor was. So you could barely fit 2 people in there, and you couldn't open the fridge and the dishwasher at the same time. So, every time my dad was cooking, Brett always wanted to get in there and kind of check it out and see what he's making, see what it looks like. And so my dad said, you know what, just stop. You need to get out of here. They called him the kitchen Nazi. It was like, you need to stop getting your nose into everything. Like, just let me do my thing. So, the kitchen was kind of off the side of the living room where Brett had all his stuff set up, with the couch, and the couch was kind of facing away from the kitchen. So all of a sudden one day, there's a little mirror on the wall in the kitchen, and we're thinking, what's this? Then we noticed there was a mirror at the foot of the couch. So Brett had rigged up this system to where he could be laying on the couch facing away from the kitchen, but looking into his mirror, reflecting into the kitchen mirror, and still get a peek at what was cooking. So I just thought that was pretty funny. It's clever. But yeah, that didn't last long. We took it down. Plus, the mirror would get all steamy once something was cooking and all that. But nice try. It was a nice try. And pretty funny. A funny story that I can tell. But yeah, so that's my grandparents. I just think overall it provided me with a more rich experience to life, to have, I grew up with my grandma for most of my life, and then, I lived around Brett for a few years, and his girlfriend, Erin, she's such a sweetheart, and, she was a hard worker. She worked as a waitress, but, she was into a lot of the same things as him with the plant identification and the gardening and stuff. And, I learned plenty of life skills from my grandparents. And, of course your parents, whoever they were raised by, they're still going to pass things on down. But, everybody is their own individual. So it was still a, extra rich experience to have the grandparents, teaching me things in life as well. Well, that's all I have for this episode. Thanks for listening. The cover art was drawn by me on Procreate on my iPad. The intro and outro music was done by my boyfriend. Check out my YouTube for video episodes of this podcast, and free crochet tutorials. Visit autumnolive.com to shop crochet pieces, patterns, and free patterns as well. Follow my Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, Etsy, and Ribbler, all at Autumn Olive Crochet. And you can find this podcast on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and now on Apple Podcasts as well. You can email in regards to this show at theoliveorchardpodcast@gmail.com. If you're still listening, I want to provide with you a life hack. I actually forgot to prepare one, so this is just one that I can think of off the top of my head, and that is to have frozen fruit around. You can either freeze it yourself or buy it already frozen. It makes great ice cubes because it will infuse your water as it melts. Great for smoothies, great for a snack, like like a frozen treat. I particularly like frozen cherries and frozen blueberries. They're really good. Frozen bananas are also good. They have more of an ice cream texture. You can also freeze lemons, and use those as ice cubes in your water. You can just freeze them with the rind on and everything. Wash them off first. But yeah, you can freeze lemons and limes with the rind on, and use those as ice cubes in your water. Alternatively, you can get like an ice cube tray and make tea or coffee and freeze that and use that as ice cubes. I want to do that. I've been into these dirty chai lattes lately, and so I think it would be really cool if I brewed up some chai tea and made ice cubes with that instead of just plain water, and then I used the chai ice cubes in my coffee, because then it won't get watered down. Or you could just make coffee and make coffee ice cubes and get the same effect. But yeah, okay, well, hopefully that's helpful for you. Thank you so much for listening, and next episode I think I'm going to be talking about toys and games from the 2000s and stuff, for a little bit of nostalgia. So yeah, be on the lookout for that. Might be a little bit of a delay because of the dog and the broken tripod. Love that. As you can tell, I'm not over it still. But yeah, thanks for listening. Okay, have a good one. Bye.